Welcome, everyone. I specifically want to invite Ms. Thomas. Are you here? I had eye surgery today. Come down to the front if you would. Before we start the meeting, got somebody I want to recognize here. This is Ms. Thomas. She gave us 5 years of service. Come on up. And she was awarded Level 3 Boardsmanship Award last night at the virtual meeting. I have a little gift for you here from the school system. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Thomas. Come over, and I'd like to get a picture with you. For her service, she was here 5 years. No one's ever been more passionate or more dedicated in what she believes in than Ms. Thomas. Thank you for your service. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you really for showing up at that meeting at Central for East High School and the turf issue. Really meant a lot that you showed up that night. And also, I want to give you your little desk. Yes, and you open that here if you'd like. Thank you so much for your service to our students. Take this with you. I also want to wish a happy birthday to Christy. She's 25. And I'm going to, the next order of business, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Cox, and he'll conduct the board chair elections. And to that end, this is my last year, and I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the board, this board, and previous boards for supporting me for the last 4 years. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve as chairman. I appreciate the support of not just the people sitting here, but the previous boards as well, going back to Mr. Green and others. It's totally and truly been a team effort, and just been a joy working with everyone. So, Dr. Cox, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you, and if you'll give me a second to get behind.
So while Mr. Hughes has come back around, would you all join me in thanking Mr. Hughes for his 4 years of service as our chair? Thank you very much. As Mr. Hughes said, this is the meeting where we elect a chair, and it's customary that the director of schools preside over the election of the chair. There's also, if you'll notice on the agenda, the election of the vice chair. I will preside only over the election of the chair, and then the newly elected chair will preside over the election of the vice chair. According to Robert's rules, when I open the floor for nominations, I will accept the nominations. There is not a requirement for a second to a motion for nomination. If there's more than one, we will vote on the nominees in the order by which they were nominated, and it will be a voice vote, so I'll ask Ms. King to call the roll. So having said that, I now open the floor for nominations to elect a chair for this coming year.
Randall Jones.
Mr. Hughes has nominated Randall Jones to be the chair. Are there any other nominations? Hearing no others, Ms. King.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Jones. You're now the chair.
Thank you, I think. What Mr. Hughes did not mention is, by board policy, he's limited to 4 years of consecutive service, and that's why he's not been nominated this year, and I do appreciate his leadership during these past 4 years. So at this time, I will entertain nominations for the vice chair.
I nominate Mr. Spivey for vice chair.
Mr. Spivey has been nominated for vice chair. Any other nominations? If not, roll call.
Mr. Hughes. Mr. Iverson. Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. Dr. Rouse. Mr. Spivey. Mr. Gilmore.
By board policy, we also have to elect a TLN representative. Those are the three positions that's listed. Last year, Mr. Spivey served as our TLN representative. That's the Tennessee Legislative Network, I believe, is what the TLN stands for. So at this time, the floor is open for nominations for the TLN representative. Mr. Hughes has nominated Mr. Iverson. Any other nominations? Nominations are closed. Ms. King?
Mr. Iverson. Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. Dr. Rouse. Mr. Spivey. Mr. Gilmore. Mr. Hughes.
There will be some other committee assignments and positions open that I will discuss during the board chairman report at the end of the meeting. At this time, we have to approve the agenda, and remember, when we approve the agenda, we're also approving the consent agenda. And there's one item that we need to change on the consent agenda before we even consider it. Item C, it should read pending IDEA litigation settlement. That's pending IDEA litigation settlement. So with that change made, I will entertain a motion. Yes, we'll take the word pending off and just make IDEA litigation settlement. Thank you. So with that modification, making it IDEA litigation settlement, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Howard has made the motion. Second. We can do a voice roll call on, or voice vote on this one. All in favor? Aye. This time we have public comment, and I think we have three, actually four, wanting to address the board. We have two on one list. And we'd ask you to come up to the microphone here at the front and to give us your name. We have your address and telephone number listed, so I don't think it will be necessary for you to repeat that to the TV audience tonight. So just give us your name, and then you have 3 minutes to make your comments. James Lewis.
Thank you, everyone. This is my first time being here, so I'm happy that I could make this comment to you. But I'm here for the kids going back to school. I'm going to be really quick about it. I've only got 3 minutes. There are a lot of kids suffering in Sullivan County. A lot of kids are failing. A lot of parents are having a difficult time with their kids logging on to these computers, being enrolled in the classrooms. A lot of working parents. A lot of parents that are having to choose between either schooling their children or putting bread on the table. On that note, there are also a lot of kids that are not safer at home. There is a virus out there, a very real virus, and I understand that. I'm not here to debate that. What I am here to say is that many kids depend on school for safety, for food, for somebody to talk with, to avoid physical abuse, to avoid sexual abuse, to avoid a lot of things that they encounter. And a lot of these kids are not being seen. They're not having someone in their corner, and they're facing much more dangerous situations than the virus. A lot of kids are not being educated, and they're not being safe. I think that, there needs to be some sort of solution. I know that there's been an abundance of caution, and I think that the board has done a great job in moving into this with caution. What I would like to say, though, is that some sort of solution needs to be developed because we have a lot of kids suffering. There's a lot of kids that are just not getting it. There are a lot of kids that are looking at failing this year, and unless something happens. And I don't think that there's been any proposal to say that, because the year of 2020 has given these children not a fair blow, that anything's going to be forgiven, or, that they're going to say, we didn't give you a fair shake, so we're going to let some things slide, or to say, there's either going to be a pass or fail grade. These kids are getting C's, D's, and F's. But, the main thing I wanted to bring in front of the board tonight was that these kids are going to need to be educated differently. It's working for some, and for some, it's not working at all. But just keep that in mind, that not all kids are safer at home. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. The next two, I think, are coming up together. Jesse Robbins, William Johnson. If you want to come in separately, that's fine also.
Hi, my name is Jessie. I go to Ketron and I'm in 3rd grade. The reason I'm here is to tell you 10 reasons why I don't like online school. I don't like carrying my computer around because my backpack is heavy. I miss my friends. I don't learn much online. It's hard to find out if my assignments get on there. Sometimes I turn in assignments and my teacher doesn't get them. Sometimes my computer lags or I get kicked off. It is hard to keep up with my teacher when she is talking fast and I can't ask questions. I can't get as much help online. I have work, but I can't always ask my teacher questions. Sometimes it's hard to focus when I'm not at school. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. All right, there you go.
I'm William Johnson from Southern North, and from somebody who, like me, who is used to the normal way of school life, it was very hard to adjust to online schooling, unlike how normal school is easier. With in-person schooling, I could just give my teacher my work, but now I have to send it to my teacher through a program that does not always work, or sometimes they cannot find it, or how I can't get as much help with remote learning like how I can with in-person learning. In conclusion, I think we should do all in-school learning, but with some restraints. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's why we're all sitting here on the stage serving, is for students like them. Daphne Matthews.
Hi, I'm Daphne Matthews. Can you hear me? I can't hear or talk with these masks on. My name is Daphne Matthews. And first, I'd like to tell you that I know your decisions are enormous. I know that no matter what you decide, somebody is going to criticize you. But I want to tell you about 2 5-year-old little girls. One is my granddaughter, the other is my great niece. Their parents work, so it has come upon me to help them with school. I'm a college graduate. I homeschooled my kids. I'm very capable of doing it. But with this online schooling, it is not working. My granddaughter is very wiggly, and she doesn't understand why she can't sit in Papa's chair and wiggle while she's watching what she is convinced YouTube videos. She's not convinced it's even a teacher teaching her. She thinks it's YouTube videos. And so she was getting in trouble every day because she would not sit up straight and keep her head still. So we quit doing lives. I refuse to do the live. We do the recordings because I don't want to make her hate school because she doesn't understand that when she's sitting in Papa's chair, she can't wiggle. The other little girl is my great niece. She's 5. They are in the same kindergarten class. One goes Monday, Tuesday, one goes Thursday, Friday to actual classes. And my niece is very smart, but I want to give you an example. My niece and my granddaughter were both in preschool last year, so they are a little bit ahead of some of the students, which is fine. In a classroom, a teacher has the opportunity to say, okay, they've mastered this. Let me give them just something a little bit harder to keep them interested. Online, that's not working. So one day last week, a picture came up. My great niece sang the rhyme, told me everything about it. And by the time that all the students were logged on and the teacher was ready to talk, she told me everything there was to tell about that rhyme. So when the teacher started talking about it, we listened. And we sat there for 30 minutes while the teacher went through line by line explaining everything that this little girl told me before the teacher even spoke. Now, I'm not putting down the teachers. This is unprecedented times. And all the teachers have been wonderful. They're all doing great. But for 5-year-olds, they need to be in a classroom. They need to see the teacher. They need to learn the rules. They need consistency. And they're not getting that. And they're having a really hard time with it. And, I have friends who have kindergartners too, and they're saying the same types of things. I know that I'm glad you all made the decision you all made back in the spring. It was, I think that was the right thing. And I even think that slowing school down and easing back into it was right. But I really feel like for these kids' sake, I'm afraid that they're not going to get an education. I'm afraid they're going to miss an entire year of school of education. And I would really ask that you would send them back to school. And that's really what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments for tonight. This time I'll turn it over to Dr. Cox for communications to the board from the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The items in the director's report were work session items, and so I'm going to turn it back over for board chairman report if you have any comments.
Okay. I'm going to move the board chairman report to the end of the agenda after we've completed the other items on the agenda, and we'll talk about some of the next board meetings and also some committee assignments. So at this time, unfinished business, Dr. Cox?
Yes, and we did talk about this in the work session, but just for the information, Mr. Hull, would you just briefly recap our status of the Holston Valley Middle School property?
Okay, are we on now? We have to assemble quite a bit of information on that. We had a survey done of that property. The previous survey and the deeds we had on that property were really a sort of a mess. And so we got all that done. We worked with the purchasing agent's office, Ms. Davis, and she advertises those and takes the bids. That one is going out for bids, and the date upon which the bids will be opened is September 30th. So I'm not exactly sure when that notice is given. It also runs in the newspaper. I'm pretty sure it'll run this Sunday. And so we should have bids in on September the 30th. There are usually some details that have to be worked out with the buyer, but I anticipate we'll be able to receive those bids and sell that school in short order.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. So I'm going to go ahead next with item 7B, and this is the consideration of the 2020-2021 operating schedule. So I have prepared a recommendation for the board this evening. Before I provide a summary again, I'd just like to say that I want to express my appreciation to our parents, our students, our teachers, and for everyone who has worked very hard through this pandemic situation, realizing how hard this has been on everyone. I would like to especially thank our teachers who have worked really hard to try to accommodate the needs of all students as best we can. And I'll just say this up front. There is no substitute for face-to-face instruction in a classroom. And so everything that we've done as an accommodation really falls short of that. But given our situation with COVID-19, I think we have really worked hard to accommodate everyone's requests. We started off, of course, online and developed a virtual learning academy program. And then when we moved to hybrid, we had a number of parents who requested to stay online. So we provided the remote choice option. So please know that we have worked really hard to try to accommodate the requests and needs of all of our students. But again, nothing takes the place of face-to-face instruction. And we're happy this evening to take another step toward getting our students back fully. The other thing that I would say, I'm pleased to share a bit of good news. As I've said before, we do have weekly meetings with the Sullivan County Department of Health. Dr. Stephen May, and Mr. Gary Mays, who's the executive director, has been very, very helpful to all of the superintendents of districts within Sullivan County, which includes Kingsport City, Bristol City, and Sullivan County. And so we have met weekly, basically since this all began, and they have provided support for us and recommendations, and I just wanted to say how deeply appreciative I am to them for all of their guidance and help, and for always being available to answer our questions. This afternoon we had our most recent meeting, and I'm pleased to report that we are just about in what we call our yellow zone. We expect with the metrics, all of the metrics, that we will be there. And if you recall, the first metric we talked about was based on the EpiCurve data, and anything above 10 was in the red zone, and then 5 to 10 is in the yellow. That was the very first metric that we took a look at. The Tennessee Department of Health did endorse another metric, which was the White House Task Force. And basically there are 3 zones there. There's white, yellow, and red. And so we've been red in just about every measure. And then today it's lagging data, but we did come into the yellow zone with the White House Task Force. And then another metric that we've looked at is the Harvard data. And so we look at these numbers every day. So really for the first time today, we are at that place where we feel comfortable in recommending a transition more fully to face-to-face, in-person instruction. And so, like I said, we've looked at all those different metrics. We have given parents as many options as they've asked for to the extent that we could. We've had conversations with our principals who have in turn talked to our teachers, and we've had lots of conversations along the way. In summary of all of that, I'm pleased this evening to bring you some recommendations that will return our students more fully to face-to-face, in-person instruction, but also say that we would like to continue, at least for the next bit, the option for those parents who have selected remote choice. In the Virtual Learning Academy, we did ask for parents to make a semester-long commitment, and the reason for that is in all of these models, we're using Sullivan County high-quality teachers and Sullivan County high-quality curriculum. And so this is all of our folks working with all of our kids, and so we're very proud of that, and proud of the fact that we're able to do that. But with the Virtual Learning Academy, we did have to assign staff to that, so asking folks to make a commitment to that helps us make our staffing arrangements at least for a semester. We also are asking, and this will be part of a recommendation for those who wish to continue with the remote choice, to make a decision within the next week and let us know by Wednesday if they would like to continue with the remote learning option. And I know that we'll have some parents that probably will want to move one way or another, but again, we're really working very hard to accommodate parent requests and choices as we move forward. So the first recommendation that I would like to make is that elementary and middle school students currently on our hybrid AB model would return to in-person attendance beginning on Monday, September 28th, 2020, with students attending in person Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and reserving Wednesday still temporarily as an online day for all students who are not enrolled in the Virtual Learning Academy. This recommendation does represent an increase of in-person instruction time from 40%, which is current in the hybrid, to 80%, with the intent to get to 100% as soon as possible. And again, for parents who have chosen the remote choice option, if it's your preference to continue, or if we have parents that want to opt for that, that we would ask for them to commit to that and let us know. The schools will be in touch by Wednesday, which is September 30th of next week. Further, recommend that high school students continue to operate in the hybrid model for the duration of the first quarter, which ends on October the 9th. And then following the first quarter, we do have fall break, which is the week of October the 12th through the 16th. And then beginning with October the 19th, we have the second quarter. And we would recommend that high school students would come back following that same schedule as elementary and middle, with in-person instruction for those currently in the AB model, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being an online day temporarily. And then finally, as our community COVID-19 transmission numbers improve, and we hope they do, we hope to be in the green zone very soon. And by the way, I want to say thank you to the members of our community who have worked really hard to be diligent in physical distancing and mask wearing, and I can tell you that our health department appreciates that, and they talk about how hard our folks have worked to get us to the place that we are. That as we would move forward and the numbers improve, that the virtual Wednesdays would diminish, the need would diminish, and would be then phased out. So I do respectfully present to you these recommendations for your consideration, and I know we've had discussion in the work session, so Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you and the board for discussion, and we'll be happy to answer any further questions that you may have.
You've heard the director's recommendation. Before we can have any discussion, we'll need a motion and a second, and then we can open it up, the floor up for discussion.
One quick clarification, and just since this is being recorded and we're asking parents things, I think, Dr. Cox, to clarify, you mentioned Wednesday, and I think you said September 30th. You actually meant September 23rd, correct, about when parents were going to let you know?
Yes, I'm sorry for that mistake. Yes, September 23rd. I read that wrong, which is next Wednesday's date, when we would ask parents to let us know. And Mr. Spivey, if I may, one other thing that I would like to say, with this recommendation, I want to be very clear that in bringing all of our students back, we do not have the same ability to provide physical distancing, and we need to be very clear and transparent about that. We will do our very best, and our students have done such a great job with learning how to physically distance, but we simply do not have the capability with all of the students coming back to guarantee that. So that I want to make that disclosure in the recommendation.
So in summary, you're recommending that K through 8 return to school on September the 28th, 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and be online on Wednesday. And then
That's correct.
And then on October the 19th, high school students will return to school 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being an online day for them. The virtual academy will continue online until the end of first semester, at least those who signed up. And you want to know by September the 23rd then which students want to continue in remote learning. That's not virtual academy, but that's remote learning. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct summary.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion then concerning his recommendation, and after we have a motion and a second, we can open the floor up for discussion. I'll make the motion for discussion purposes, if I can get a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, and Mr. Robinson seconds. So the floor is open for discussion at this time.
I won't go through all the details we did in the workshop, but I'll repeat that my differences with this recommendation is the Wednesdays and putting off the high school. And I think that the parents that have a job 5 days a week have had a really tough time already, and most people have to work on Wednesdays. And I appreciate the effort, and we're heading in the right direction. But those are my differences, as I mentioned in the workshop.
Well, and Mr. Jones, you may be about to do the same thing. I'll make a motion to amend the plan to have a date certain that we would plan on going back full time and to take the Wednesdays out after, I guess the last day would be that October the 9th of 2020. And then that way when we came back for the second 9 weeks after fall break, it would be with the expectation that it would be 5 days a week.
Okay, Mr. Spivey has made the motion to amend Dr. Koch's recommendation to have the K through 8 attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, have online learning on 2 more Wednesdays. That would be the up through October the 9th, and then when we return on October the 19th after fall break, K through 8 would be 5 days a week. Is that correct? Okay, do we have a second on that motion or that amendment?
And just to clarify, so high school would also be 5 days a week, is that correct? I said just to clarify, high school would also be 5 days a week after October the 19th.
So with the amendment, we would have 2 more Wednesdays of where students would be online for K through 8 plus high school would have online and the hybrid, and then returning on October the 19th, which is the Monday after fall break, everyone will be returning full-time 5 days a week. That's the motion with a second. Any discussion on the? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Gilmore seconded. Okay. So we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that?
I got a question. Do we have a plan to help catch up our high school students, which I mentioned the failure rates? When you've got triple the failure rate, 2/3 of those are students that normally wouldn't be failing. Do we have a plan, to try to help catch those, or can we work on a plan to help catch those students up? You hate to see their this whole year dictated by these first few weeks.
As I shared in the work session, a good bit of the reason that we have students failing is a lack of assignments, missing assignments. So I think the initial part of any plan would be to encourage students to turn those assignments in. I think teachers are very generous about allowing that, and that would be the first step, and especially for those students that are returning to in-person learning. So that really is the most critical part of students reducing their failure rates.
Any other comments?
What would we be voting on, Mr. Jones, just for clarity purpose? Just the amendment, and then would we have further discussion on the plan itself? Or that's what I wanted to clarify for everybody.
I think we can combine the two together and just have one vote if,
Okay, I figured some
Mr.
people
Iverson.
may want to.
vote on this amendment. Okay, we'll have a roll call on this amendment, and that doesn't pass the resolution that Dr. Cox recommended, but vote on the amendment, and Mr. Iverson then has an additional amendment. So, Christie, if you would call the roll on the amendment.
I got a question, though. I guess I get why we're wanting to take the Wednesday out and putting them back to 5 days. I understand all that, but what if we have a lot of kids that it's in our hybrid right now at request to stay remote, and we take this Wednesday from our teachers? And are we going to have a special meeting to come if that happens to change this? Because to me, if you got more kids remote, our teachers are going to need that Wednesday to get all this.
We have another meeting scheduled on October the 8th already, another school board meeting. So if there's major changes in the enrollment, I think we would have to go back and address the issue then.
Right,
But
and that's a good point, Mr. Robinson, because even with my amendment, my intent is to get back to, I think, what we all want, and Mr. Jones actually brought that point up in the work session. But also, we need, in transparency, I mean, we're all dealing with this on a real-time basis, and so we will be meeting as a school board again before that step took place. If we had a drastic change in some kind of numbers, obviously that might have to be reevaluated. But I think everybody on the board wants to be clear to the community, both teachers and to parents, so we can do our best to attempt to plan in an imperfect situation.
So right now, we are voting on an amendment that will amend Dr. Cox's recommendation that would put us back in school on September the 28th, 4 days a week with 2 virtual Wednesdays, and then on October the 19th, we'd go 5 days. And then after that, Mr. Iverson will make another recommendation for something else that would be amended to what we're voting on now. So roll call for this amendment. Christie?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson? Dr. Rouse? Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes? Mr. Ireson?
Okay, that brings us to the motion that would allow us to be in school 4 days a week, Wednesdays, again, the 2 days, and then on October the 19th, we would go full-time with the reservation that, or with the statement that we could change things on October the 8th if we encounter a major increase in the enrollment. Now, I know I'm repeating lots of things, but I think it's important to make sure we're clear on the dates on this. Now, Mr. Iverson, you want to make a motion?
It's a motion to amend, and the reason I'm doing this is I want to make an amendment that we start 5 days a week. I don't want to have the Wednesday even for the couple times. I really don't want to let the high school students start in October. I'd like everybody to start on September 28th. So my motion is to have us all start back complete virtual or complete face-to-face on September 28th. We still would have the virtual academy option, We're still going to have the remote choice option. So I guess I need to stop there and see if I can get a second before I continue talking. To allow conversation? Can I keep going? Is it okay?
You heard Mr. Iverson's recommendation, and his recommendation is that we start 5 days a week on September the 28th. That's for K through 8. Motion was made by Mr. Iverson and second by Mr. Hughes. The floor is open for discussion on this amendment. Let's say I'm sorry, K-12.
As of right now, the only group that doesn't have the ability to kind of get what they want is the group that wants to come back to school completely. We're allowing a virtual academy, so you can choose to stay home completely if you want to, all the way to the end of the year. You have another remote choice that if you're not comfortable with it, and even if we make this choice now to say we're back the 28th, they can make a choice to go virtual and stay virtual. The only group we're not allowing to have that option is the ones that say, I want my kids to be in school face-to-face every day. And that's the group that I think we're not, and I don't mean this poorly, but we're really not listening to the comments. I mean, all 4 people that came up here today to talk to us, please get our kids back face-to-face. I know we're heading towards that, but starting Monday, Kingsport City Schools are K through 12, face-to-face, 5 days a week. Bristol has been face-to-face 5 days a week for elementary school for weeks now. I think that our kids need to be back fully 5 days a week. I mean, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they say the same thing. The kids in most cases, not most, I'm sorry, in lots of cases, are much safer coming back to school than they are staying home. We have a lot of people in this area that can't afford to feed their children. We have a lot of people in this area that there's a lot of abusive cases. Those are down 75%. The reported cases are down 75%. I don't think anybody believes, and the Sheriff's Department actually backed that up. It's not that the cases aren't happening. Our schools is where they were being identified. So leaving these children home whenever the parents are begging us to put them back, I think is a mistake. The Harvard metric that Dr. Cox brought up, it says when you go yellow, you bring kids back. It doesn't say 4 days a week. It says you bring K through 5 back. So in my opinion, that's what we need to do. I think we need to go ahead and bring them back. We need to give the people the option of bringing them back. And if someone chooses to stay virtual, then we have those avenues for them to do. So that is my motion. That is the reason I said it.
One clarification, Mr. Iverson. The Harvard metric does not say bring them back 5 days a week. It says bring them back to safe schools with social distancing and following CDC guidelines, which we have been clear about and which Kingsport and Bristol have been clear about we are unable to do. So I'm not arguing with your motion. I just don't want you to misstate what the metrics actually say.
I'm all for getting the students back in school full-time, face-to-face also, but I do think that the first grading period, which ends on October the 9th, is that correct? 10th? 9th, is a good time to get the high school back in with the systems that they're set up on. I think also if we move back in slowly, it gives our teachers and parents some time to adjust to the new transportation schedule, and also to give us time to find out who does want remote learning, because the September the 23rd deadline that Dr. Cox mentioned will apply to the high school as well as elementary school, in my opinion, that we would find out who does want to go remote learning. And I'm afraid that if we go back in too quickly, that we may end up shutting down again. There's fall break in there, which takes 7 days out. I realize that sounds like a month between now and the time we're talking about getting the high school in full time, but there's a fall break in there that covers 7 of those days, and I guess actually 11 of those days when you look at it, counting the weekends. But the motion has been made and seconded, and other comments on
the only comment I have is just overwhelming appeals by teachers to preserve those Wednesdays during a transition. And, you know, as a former classroom teacher, I think we need to listen not just to the parents and students, but also to the teachers and put them in the best situation that we can for success.
That's exactly what you and Dr. Rouse both said in the work session, and I agree, because sometimes it is easy to forget. And for clarity for the public, our virtual system is actually using Sullivan County teachers, which is a great thing, because your kids are getting our teachers and our curriculum. Some of the others are using some third-party vendors, so that's a great thing. But we also have to acknowledge the reality that results in the teachers doing twice the work. So I know that you get some people making comments about, oh, teachers are always not going to want to go back. That's not true. Teachers are working harder than anybody right now, and they worked harder this summer. They worked harder last spring. They want to be back in the classroom as much as anybody, so I agree. I mean, we have to listen to what they're telling us, because without them at the top of their game, then really all you're doing is asking for a child care service, and that's not, I mean, I think we're all realizing with this pandemic that how much school systems and public education drive the economy. I mean, that's just a fact. But they are much, much more than a child care center. They're also, you know, character building, and that's done from the love and support of teachers. So we also do need to take that into account.
I think one of the things I think about is those high school students that are on the bubble and that are failing. If this period between now and the end of this semester would give them time to pull those grades up instead of fail a semester, maybe we're too close to the end for that to even happen. But I've seen a lot of the numbers, and it really concerns me that we're going to have such a high percentage of students fail the first semester in one or more classes. I think we talked about 46% for one that's fell in one course, 29 that's fell in two, and so on and so forth. That's just shocking. I don't know how they recover the rest of the year and pull their grades up. That's one of the things I just keep dwelling on.
And maybe that's something we need to start being more transparent about with parents, just so they can understand that there is a lot of leniency in our policies right now as far as turning those missed assignments in. So if you just take a set day, that might be very true. But if we have a 10-day period where they can make it up, then I would hope that number would change. But that's a great point, Mr. Hughes, and I know it's a balancing act for everybody. And you also made some really good points in the work session. I think that they concern me too, and that's part of the reason I agreed with what Dr. Rouse and Mr. Jones said, to try to give us an end date, because there is a lot of concern, and Mr. Iverson said it too, about a lot of kids that rely on the school system for a safe place to go and for food. I mean, we just need to acknowledge that. I mean, it is a balancing act, and nothing's going to be perfect for anybody, but I would hope everybody sees everybody up here is trying the best that we can.
Any other comments before we vote on the amendment? And Mr. Iverson's amendment is to the final motion that we have, which included my amendment. So his is to bring everyone back on September the 28th. That's K through 12, 5 days a week. Christy?
Mr. Robinson. Dr. Rouse. Mr. Spivey. Mr. Gilmore. Mr. Hughes. Mr. Iverson. Mr. Jones.
No. We're back to the original motion that was amended to include Wednesdays as a virtual learning day for 2 days, and then start everyone back on October the 19th, 5 days a week. Any further discussion on that motion? If not, we'll do a roll call on that.
Dr. Rouse. Mr. Spivey. Mr. Gilmore. Mr. Hughes? Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Motion passed 5-2. We will start K through 8 back to school 4 days a week on September the 21st. Wednesdays for 2 weeks will be, 28th. Yeah, Rick, make sure you get that right. On Monday the 28th of September, we'll start back K through 8, 5 days a week or 4 days a week, with Wednesdays as a virtual learning day. The last virtual learning day will be on October the 9th. After fall break, we'll return to school on October the 19th, 5 days a week for K through 12, realizing that we have a board meeting on Thursday, October the 8th, and that if numbers were to increase in our online learning, that we would make adjustments if needed on that date. So this is as definitive as we can get with an end date, but knowing that everyone will have Wednesdays for a couple more weeks to where they can make plans for their remote learning, that should help both teachers and parents. Dr. Cox, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you, members of the board. This is really tough work, and this is something that has been given lots and lots of consideration, and again, everybody is working very hard to get our students back in and trying to accommodate everybody. So I do appreciate all of the thoughts from all the board members, from all the staff, and from everyone who has shared their thoughts with us through email, through phone call. Much appreciated. And so we look forward to the day when all of our students are back with us full time as soon as possible. So my understanding is that item 7C is being, Mr. Iverson, you're requesting that we pull that. So we move then to new business. And so what I would recommend is that we group the new business policies, items A, B, C, and D. We're requesting those to be adopted on a first reading for waiver of rules. So I would recommend a motion to waive the rules on those first 4 policies and then to adopt them on first reading.
Mr. Iverson makes the motion to waive the rules on the first 4 policies. Do I have a second? Have a second, Mr. Hughes. Roll call on the waiver of rules.
Mr. Spivey? Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes? Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson? Dr. Rouse?
Now I need a motion on adopting these 4 policies on the first reading. Mr. Iverson, motion, second by Mr. Hughes. Roll call.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes? Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson? Dr. Rouse? Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Thank you. Then we move to item 8E, which is disciplinary hearing authority committee names. You have a list of names that are being recommended for consideration and approval.
Do we have a motion to accept those names as discipline hearing authority? And it's my understanding that the ones on the positions would be selected from that list if there is a case to have a hearing.
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
Jones, so that we have the minimal number to have a pool to select from.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept this list? Dr. Rouse makes the motion. Mr. Spivey seconds.
I have one question, just for clarification purposes. When we have a pool, is that selection random, or or do we need to spell that out, or are we treating that more as procedural? I'm not trying to get too much into the procedure, but
the thought really was just to have enough people based on the situation, and it would depend on the situation a lot. If anyone would have a conflict, of course, they would be excluded, just to have enough approved people so that any given, and schedules, et cetera.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes? Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson, Dr. Rouse, Mr. Spivey.
Yes.
Thank you. The next two policies, item F and G, are policies that we're asking for first reading. So I don't,
We
a
don't
vote is not required for
we
those.
don't need a vote on that.
So those will appear on second reading. Item H is we request approval of the memorandum of understanding between the Sullivan County Board of Education and the Sullivan County Regional Health Department. And this is a yearly agreement that we make with them. So we do recommend approval.
Do I have a motion to accept the recommendation? Mr. Gilmore? Dr. Rouse seconds. Roll call.
Mr. Hughes? Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson? Dr. Rouse? Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
And the final item under new business is item I. We do recommend the proposed changes in the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook as an amendment.
Mr. Hughes makes the motion to accept the recommendation of the Student Rights and Handbooks Amendment. Do you have a second? Mr. Gilmore seconds. Any discussion?
The attendance modification, yes.
Yes. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Iverson? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson? Dr. Rouse? Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I moved the chairman's report to the end, and bear with me, it'll be a little longer than normal. There's some house cleaning business since this is the first meeting of the new year. I wanted to review the committees that we currently have. Now, these are not standing committees, but these are committees that usually we have goes year to year. The only standing committee on the board is the executive committee, which is made up of the board chairman and the superintendent. These other committees are basically approved by the board on a yearly basis as far as the positions themselves, and then assignments are made from the board members. But these are what we currently have, and I'm going to read those to you and ask you to think about these between now and October the 8th. And if you would, let Christy know which committee that you would like to serve on. Currently, we have the athletic committee. Mr. Robinson is on that committee. We have the ethics committee that by school board policy and state law, we have to have 3 members. 2 of those have to be school board members. Currently, we have Mr. Hughes, Mr. Spivey, and myself. We have the facilities committee that Mr. Hughes has served on as chairman. We have the policy committee that I've served on for several years. We have the curriculum/textbook committee that Mr. Gilmore has served on. And we have the collaborative conferencing that Mr. Iverson has served on for at least 2 years, if not all 4 years. So those are the committees that exist. And if you would, let Christy know which committee you would be interested in serving on, your first choice, your second choice. And then, Christy, if you would send those to me after you get those, we'll have assignments ready by next month. Board policy also requires a board self-evaluation on a yearly basis. I think it just says an annual self-evaluation will be completed. In past years, we've done this usually in the month of October or November. The policy also says that it must be a board meeting or where that's the only item on the agenda. So in October, on October the 8th, I would like to give out the forms for the self-evaluation, and then we would do the results at a call meeting before the November meeting. And we could do a call meeting 30 minutes before the regular meeting so that we wouldn't have to make 2 trips that particular month. Is that all right with everybody? And director's evaluation. There is a, in the director's contract and also in board policy, it says that there will be a yearly evaluation. The director's contract says that the evaluation has to be completed by the end of September. Now, there's a form that we've used for several years that was furnished by TSBA a few years ago. It's a 2-page form. TSBA has another form that's somewhere around 10 to 15 pages that we could use, but we've always used this 2-page one, and Christy and I talked about this today, and I'm going to distribute the 2-page form to you, and we need to have it back in to her by September the 28th, if at all possible. We don't have to have the results tabulated before the end of September, but we have to have the forms completed by then. And I would encourage each of you to try to schedule, now we need to talk to Dr. Cox about this, but I would encourage you to try to schedule maybe a 30-minute conference with him to sit down and talk about the form before you actually complete it. Might take longer than that, but I think it would give him a chance to talk with you about some of the things that might not be obvious to you as you start through it. Dr. Rouse, since it's your first meeting, I don't think you can take one, but I don't think it's something that you would want to have to complete unless you want to complete one for me. But if you'll take one of these and well, we will, but Chris, we will. Once they meet with Dr. Cox, they'll send them to Christy, and Christy gets them to Pat, and Pat tabulates. I think that's the way we've done in the past. Is that right, Christy? Okay. Either way, that Mr. Hull is one who actually does the tabulations. I never see those. These are confidential. And then they come back, according to board policy, they come back to the chairman as a summary, and I have to sit down with Dr. Cox and go over the summary, and then we do it also in a regular meeting. But the main thing is for us to get it completed by the 28th, and then we'll get it to Pat, let Pat do the compile it for us, and just like we have in the past. But again, I would encourage you to go through and look at this and sit down with Dr. Cox if possible. If you don't feel like you have all the information there, because I know there's some that I would probably ask him a question about. Any questions on that? We've got the board self-evaluation that we'll have due. We've got the director's evaluation. New board member orientation. Dr. Rouse is the only new board member, and policy requires that the director of schools and or chairman actually do a orientation session for her. So, Mary, you got it planned, so you're taken care of on that. There needs to be a Board of Education group picture made on October the 8th at central office, and we'll need to do it, meet there about probably 4 o'clock. So it's got 4 o'clock. We'll meet there and do the group picture. Then we'll come back here for the work session and also for the meeting that night at 6:30. So 4 p.m. on the 8th, we'll do a picture. And Mary, you're doing your individual picture another time, right, with Sherry. So we're taking care of on that. School board policy also says that we meet the first Thursday of every month. That's what policy calls for, and this has gotten changed quite a bit because of the COVID. Our meeting right now is scheduled for October the 8th, which is actually the second Thursday, but starting in November, I would love to try to get us back on a schedule of where we meet on the first Thursday so I can pencil my calendar in for the whole year if possible and kind of know what's going on. And I'd also like for you to be thinking about the work sessions. In the past, we've done those the Thursday before the meeting, and that allows us plenty of time to talk. Since COVID, we've been doing work sessions and everything together, but think about whether or not you want to do a work session on a separate day or where you want to put them all together. But if you would be prepared to discuss that on the 8th, that would let us move forward then in an organized way. We also need to do an annual retreat. Again, board policy calls for that. We haven't scheduled that yet, but we'll be looking at some dates to do an annual retreat and see if we can find one on a day that Rick can't get out of town to go with us, and like he did last year when he got us confused. And I think that takes care of most of my notes. Okay, other board members, I'm going to start with Mr. Iverson and see if there's any comments coming around anybody needs to make. Dr. Rouse?
would like to recognize and honor Chief District Judge Pamela Reeves, who passed away in September. She was a classmate of mine at Sullivan East. She was the first female president of the Tennessee Bar Association before being nominated to the judgeship in 2013 and confirmed in 2014 with a 99-0 vote. She was the first female Article III judge in the Eastern District of Tennessee and the first female chief judge of the Eastern District of Tennessee. She was truly a trailblazer and had a remarkable, legible, and public service career. U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander said her diligence and fairness as a lawyer and judge set an example for others, especially for women in the legal profession. I am proud to have known such a remarkable person and very proud to say she was a Sullivan East patriot. She will be greatly missed, and we send our condolences to her family. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes, any comments? Yeah.
I would mention that the community lost a good friend and a veteran. Ernie Rumsey passed away this past week. If you would, keep his family in your thoughts and prayers.
I'd just like once again to thank Mr. Hughes for his leadership over the last 4 years and to wish Mr. Jones Godspeed leading us forward.
I wouldn't have said anything, but I'm so glad, Dr. Roush, you said that. I knew her. She was a wonderful person, a great lawyer, and an even better judge. I appeared before her. And just, I know this is a school board meeting, but she was from East, and she was proud of it. She told me the first time she ever met me, she was from Sullivan County. To give you an idea of her kind of character, she battled the illness for 2 years and could have stepped down, but she worked the whole time, all the way up until the end. And so I'd say prayers for her and her family.
I don't really have a whole lot. I guess I just recommendation, and I know we've been nothing against Central Cougars or nothing, but I'd like for us to maybe start looking around at maybe having these meetings at different schools instead of just here in our office. It'd be nice if we could. I don't really know what time it is, and sometimes we get out of these late. But to me, it'd be nice if maybe a tour after or a tour before the school. Because most of us up here work, and it's hard to get out and see all the schools, and I think it'd be beneficial to all of us to actually go walk through and see everything.
I think Mr. Robinson and I talked at the last meeting or a couple of meetings ago about maybe doing some of our work sessions at different schools, not the meetings, but just the actual work sessions itself, and walking through, and be very beneficial. We've got lots of work to do between now and the end of this school year, and it's overwhelming to think of what all has to be done, and we're fighting the pandemic, I know that, but we've got a new high school that's going to open up. We've got other schools that's going to be shuffled around, other middle schools that's going to open up, so the work doesn't stop once we get the kids back in school 5 days a week. We're going to put together a timeline of things that we need to do. There's moves that need to be made, and they're not going to get done without a lot of help and a lot of prayers, a lot of physical work to get that done. And we're going to have to work together as a team to do that, and we appreciate all the help that y'all are going to put forth on this. And this board has to continue to work together as a team to make it all come together, because there's some major things. They're going to happen whether we're ready or not. It's going to be like the pandemic. It's going to hit us, but we want to be as prepared as we can be. And we're going to work hard to do that, to try to be organized and ready to make it happen. So if there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned.